Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Bob Harvey.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As was just stated, my name is Bob Harvey. I'm the President and CEO of the Partnership, and it's my special pleasure to welcome you to the 4th Annual State of Energy event. Now, today, as you know, we'll welcome Lamar McKay, Deputy Group Chief Executive of BP P.L.C., for an insight into the current energy environment, including the impact of the current political atmosphere on the industry. But before I go any further, and unrelated to energy, I did want to announce something that's certainly important for many of you who've been following the partnership, following city politics, following what we've called the biggest issue facing Houston, and that is the fact that the governor, just a few minutes ago, signed the Houston pension bill, so we now have that solution. So we'll be recognizing this in the next few days. We think this is a signature accomplishment, not just for the mayor, though I would like to give Mayor Turner special credit for his leadership, but it's really an accomplishment for this entire community, for a community to come together around an issue as difficult, contentious, and complex as pensions and be successful is really quite noteworthy. So I think you'll see recognition of that success in not just the local media, but the national media in the coming days. So let me shift back to energy for a minute. Now, I really felt like I couldn't start a discussion like this without mentioning some energy statistics, many of which you're familiar with. You know, it's been a tough 3 years for upstream oil and gas. 3 years ago, roughly, on June 20th, 2014, West Texas Intermediate closed at just under $108 a barrel. 19 months later, in February of 16, it had fallen by 75% to just over $26 a barrel. And yesterday's oil price close was $49.66, almost double the low and just about half of the high. Of course, a lot of people are calling $45 to $55 a barrel the new normal. The Baker Hughes domestic rig count peaked at 1,931 on September of 14, before falling by almost 80% to 404 rigs 20 months later. And it has since more than doubled from the low to 908 last Friday. Maybe a stat that we don't follow quite as closely, but perhaps we should. Domestic oil production, now this was before my time, but we hit a peak of domestic oil production back in 1970 of right at 10 million barrels a day. That, through various ups and downs, reached a low of 4.2 million barrels back in September of 2005. And then, of course, since September of 2005, initially the slow introduction and then the rapid introduction of fracking, horizontal drilling, the shale play, as we've called it, led to an increase. And last month, domestic crude production hit 9.3 million barrels a day. So more than double the low of a decade ago, approaching that all-time high of 1970. Now, through this 3-year cycle, we estimate that Houston lost approximately 81,000 upstream oil-related jobs. So about 1 in 4 upstream oil-related jobs were lost in this downturn. But on a base of 3 million payroll jobs in Houston, it's been interesting that the effect on the Houston economy has been nowhere near as dramatic, frankly, certainly as the mid-'80s, when we lost 1 out of 7 jobs across all sectors of the economy in the mid-'80s. So the overall effect on the Houston economy has been modest. Hopefully we're beginning to see some improvement in this regard. So getting away from the statistics, through this downturn, what has been really notable in my mind have been the investments in technology which have continued to advance the industry, creating efficiencies that are now paying off even in this lower oil price environment. You have an informational card at your table that just shows some of the what I'd call staggering statistics on the dominance of Houston on the energy industry. When we say the energy capital of the world, we can support that every which way, as you can see in that data. Now, industry leaders like BP lead Houston, they lead the industry by innovating through new technology that increases energy production and helps meet rising global demand. In Houston, the exchange of technology, knowledge, and best practices is constant, making Houston the intellectual capital for the energy industry. And even through the downturn, Houston's network of operators and service companies, skilled workforce, and the availability of advanced technology have sustained our region as the powerhouse in the industry. Now, fortunately for Houston, as the upstream oil and gas industry throttled back in 15 and 16, downstream and petrochem continued to expand. And I wanted to mention just a few examples of recent energy projects, really in the downstream space, that are quite notable. SBE Chemical Partners' commitment to build a $210 million ethylene to butene 1 processing facility just down the road in Baytown. Total has announced plans to build a 625,000-ton polyethylene plant here in Houston. ME Global Americas, which is a joint venture between Dow and the Petrochemical Industries Company of Kuwait, is locating its corporate headquarters in Sugar Land. And Saudi Basic Industries Corporation, SABIC, relocated their Americas headquarters from Massachusetts to Houston last year. So we continue to see good news, admittedly more in the downstream than the upstream. We do now appear to be in a more favorable regulatory environment for the industry, which we believe will increase the strength of the industry and in turn the strength of the sector here in Houston. And in the midst of the current debate over the Paris Climate Accord, BP and other energy companies are continuing their work towards a lower carbon future. And I look forward to hearing from Lamar about how BP is navigating the current political climate. So before we continue, I'd like to turn your attention to a brief video acknowledging our sponsors for today's event, as well as our local officials and the Consular Corps. Let's watch the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, the generous support of our members is essential to the success of the Greater Houston Partnership and our work of making the Houston region greater. Please join us in thanking today's State of Energy Diamond sponsor is BP America, Inc. Today's Platinum sponsors are the Boston Consulting Group, Chevron, Repsol, Shell Oil Company. Today's Gold sponsors are Direct Energy, Hess Corporation. Our Silver sponsors are Deloitte, Exxon Mobil, Jacobs, Linde Engineering North America, Inc., Mitsubishi Corporation, Americas, PwC, Reliant, and NRG Company, Sapient Global Markets, Southwestern Energy. VIP Reception Underwriter is Accenture. Photography Underwriter is Hub International. Information Card Underwriter is PKF of Texas. Supporting media partner is Pink Petro. Also, thanks to our staging partner, J&S Audio Visual. And our production partner, Vision. The Greater Houston Partnership would like to express our sincere appreciation to the members of Houston's Consular Corps for everything they do to establish positive foreign relations between the Houston region and their respective countries. Their leadership is invaluable to building and maintaining the region's key international relationships. The Greater Houston Partnership would also like to acknowledge our elected officials, the men and women who represent Houston at the local, state, and federal level, for their work to improve our region. Please join us in thanking all of our sponsors, members of the Consular Corps, and our elected officials.
Can we show our support with a round of applause? Thank you. Now, I'm told that City Council is still in session, so none of the members of Council who were expected to come have made it over. But I do want to recognize a senior county elected official, County Attorney Vince Ryan. Vince, are you here? There you are. Thank you. Thanks for being here. As you heard in the video, we do like to acknowledge the Consular Corps because of the absolutely critical role they play connecting the Houston economy with the rest of the world. Would the members of the Houston Consular Corps who are present please stand and let us recognize you? There we go. And finally, would my fellow members of the partnership board that are present, would you all please stand and let us recognize you for the work you do for the city and for the partnership. Thank you. Now, I also want to give special recognition to Pink Petro. You may have heard reference to them on the video. Pink Petro has partnered with us to provide a live stream of today's State of Energy address by Lamar McKay. Now, this is something we've been wanting to do for some time, and what better event than the one that highlights this particular industry in Houston that we're so well known for. So thanks to Katie Minert and Linda Laurel with Pink Petro for making this live streaming possible. Now, before we break for lunch, I want to take a moment to explain the live polling we'll be conducting during our break. There are instructions at your tables that explain the process, but the basics are that you can vote through text message, and capitalization does not matter. We're trying to make this easy. I'm not the only Aggie in the room, but we're trying to make this easy. But correct spacing and spelling does matter, so that's the problem. Also, your responses will be completely anonymous. Your phone number will not be stored or saved. We look forward to your responses. This is something we want to introduce in other of our events. We thought we would do it a bit tongue-in-cheek at this event, doing it over lunch. So let's do that. Let's take a break for lunch. Our program will continue in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Bob Harvey.
Well, we'd like to resume our program. Of course, feel free to keep eating. I hope you enjoyed the polling questions. My staff is going to be so upset with me. Am I the only person in here that didn't figure out how to do that? Susan, I know you were betting against me, Susan, but all right, everyone else seemed to do very well. I hope you enjoy that. I hope we can do that again. So I think generally speaking, we're all thinking that things are looking up for the industry. I think the general perception is that for the most segments of the energy industry, we're past the bottom, and that things may be looking up. The debate seems to be more about how quickly things will improve. But as you see in the variation in our answers, it's not like there's a complete consensus on any of these points. So it's great that we're all here today to have this discussion. Well, thank you for participating in the polling. We'll do that again in the future. Now, I'd like to turn your attention to a brief video provided by BP, and then we'll resume our program. Thank you. Now let's welcome Greg Hill, President and COO of Hess Corporation and Chair of the Partnership's Energy Advisory Committee, to the podium to introduce our keynote speaker. Greg, thanks for coming.
All right, well, thanks, Bob, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for your support of today's State of the Energy event. My colleagues and I from Hess greatly appreciate the opportunity to network not only with energy colleagues, but government folks as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lamar McKay, who is the Deputy Group Chief Executive at BP. In this role, Lamar is accountable for group strategy, long-term planning, safety and operational risk, and group technology. In addition to supporting the Group Chief Executive, Bob Dudley, he also focuses on various corporate governance activities, including ethics and compliance. Now, Lamar started his career in 1980 with Amoco. He's held a range of technical and leadership roles. He worked on the BP-Amoco merger and served as head of strategy and planning for exploration and production before moving up the ranks to Executive Vice President, BP America. And in 2009, Lamar was appointed chairman and president of BP America, serving as BP's chief representative in the U.S. before assuming his current role he served as chief executive upstream, which was responsible for the worldwide exploration, development, production in BP. Now, that's his work bio. So a lot of you probably didn't know that Lamar was also featured in Blomberg's piece in 2012 called Executives Who Rock. So Lamar is also an outstanding killer electric guitar player, and his band Southern Slang has regular concerts here in Houston at the Armadillo Club, the Redneck Country Club, the Continental Club, to name just a few. So in addition to seeing Lamar here today, you might see him out in a completely different role. So please join me in welcoming my very good friend, Lamar McKay. Thanks, Lamar.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg. That was very, very kind. Wasn't expecting that, but very nice. First of all, it's fantastic to be here today, and I do appreciate the kind introduction and the warm welcome. It's great to be in Houston. It's always great to be here. I am based in London with my job and live in London, but also have an office here in Houston and have a house here in Houston, so I do consider Houston home. And I've spent quite a bit of time in Houston working. Greg mentioned it as 4 years as chairman and president of BP America through a pretty difficult time in our history. But some of you may not know that BP's home here in Houston. Houston is our largest employee base of anywhere in the world. It's been an exceptionally important office for us over the years, and in fact, I work in the same building in Houston today that I worked in with Amoco back 25 years ago. So Houston is home, and Houston itself over the last few decades, it's really become a truly global city in every sense of the word that you can imagine. In fact, earlier this month, you may have seen in the Los Angeles Times, Houston was reported to be the most ethnically and racially diverse city, major metropolis in the country. So demographers have also projected that over the next decade, I believe, Houston could surpass Chicago in terms of the overall population. So there's something good about Houston, and people are attracted to Houston. And it has remained, as it was decades ago, the energy capital of the world, probably more today than it ever was. So it attracts engineers, it attracts innovators, it attracts business people, it attracts loads of creative people from all over the country and every corner of the planet. And both the membership and the growth of the Greater Houston Partnership, that reflects Houston's emergence as a truly world-class global city. And just looking out at the audience and all the companies and industries and people here in the audience, I mean, what could be better proof than that? This is a Greater Houston Partnership is a forum that, in addition to supporting economic development for the city, it also supports policy discussions on some very, very important issues. Bob mentioned the pension piece earlier. And so I just want to take a second to congratulate everybody at Greater Houston Partnership, just to congratulate you on your achievements and what the organization has achieved. A little bit of... Like I say, I want to thank you guys for letting me speak today, and I'm here to talk about the state of the energy industry, and of course, barely scratch the surface in 20 minutes or so. But let me talk a little bit about how we got here, where we are today, where we might be in the near future, and where we're going longer term. So when you work in this industry, you learn pretty quickly that things are constantly changing. It means companies like BP, it means companies that you work for have to change constantly. And as people here in Houston know that have been around Houston or lived in Houston for a while, they know too well price shocks have been a recurring feature of the global energy industry for decades, since the 1970s. So it's easy to forget when things are pretty stable in 2010 through 14. You could even go back to say 05 to 2014, stable, prices rising. It's really not that stable, but it feels stable as prices are going up. But stability, of course, is not the norm in our industry. It's quite the opposite. And in recent years, we've been, as Bob mentioned, 2014, the price of oil, we've been dealing with an extraordinary amount of simultaneous change, multiple types of changes. So for starters, a dramatic oil price decline that began in late 2014, it's been followed by a slow and uneven recovery in our industry as the markets slowly and eventually begin to rebalance. This external environment has forced companies to make significant adjustments on capital expenditures, on operating costs, on operating efficiency, on headcounts. Now, we've all had to do that. We've all had to make our businesses competitive at a much lower price level than we saw over the last several years. Now, one of the biggest reasons for the price drop was the U.S. shale and tight oil revolution. That's arguably been the fastest and most significant energy transformation that I can recall in my career. The shale revolution began right here in Texas. It's fueled a huge surge in oil and gas output here in the U.S. In fact, between 2005 and 2016, and Bob touched on this a bit, U.S. oil production has increased 71%, and natural gas production here in the U.S. has increased 50%. But something else remarkable happened during that period, that America's energy-related CO2 emissions actually declined by 14%. And indeed, America has become a genuine global leader in CO2 emission reductions. Largely, in this case, because lower carbon natural gas has been displacing coal in the power sector. Now, I'd like you to consider a few numbers. In 2005, natural gas accounted for roughly 19% of U.S. net power generation. In 2016, it's 34%. Meanwhile, coal went from about 50% of power generation to about 30%, while wind energy went from less than 0.5% to nearly 6% here in the U.S. The U.S. Energy Information Agency reports that for 2 consecutive years now, the overall carbon intensity of America's power sector has declined by around 5%. That is a very large change for 2 consecutive years. In fact, that's the first time since 1973 that we've seen a decline 2 years in a row. Now, the global energy mix has been changing as well amid soaring demand in developing countries such as China and India. And so between 1995 and 2015, that 20-year period, total primary energy consumption around the world increased by 53%, with oil consumption rising by 30%, natural gas consumption up by 63%, coal consumption up by 71%, and consumption of renewables up 870%. So amid all these recent changes, some of the world's largest oil-producing nations have been experiencing political and social instability, or facing economic sanctions, or rejoining global markets, or opening up to foreign investment. Add all of that up, and we're clearly in the middle of a transformational movement for our energy industry. Now, so the big questions are, what comes next? Will supply and demand trends continue at their current pace? Will they accelerate? Will they slow down? Will they reverse? And what does it all mean for the ongoing transition toward a lower carbon energy mix? So as Deputy Chief Executive of BP, part of my job is to examine and think about these questions, and then help the company devise a long-term strategy for safe and sustainable growth. Now, needless to say, we base our long-term strategy on the long-term outlook for the global energy economy. Now, before I get to the long-term outlook, let me just say a quick word about the short-term outlook for prices. Now, of course, we don't predict prices, but I'll give you some insight maybe in what we're thinking. In the first quarter of 2017, the price of the global benchmark oil is Brent crude from the North Sea. It averaged about $54 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate was a bit less than that. That compares with $49 a barrel in the fourth quarter of last year and $34 a barrel in the first quarter of last year. Now, for the remainder of the year, for the short term, we do think things are rebalancing. We do think that it's going to continue, but it's slow. And some of it depends on whether the extension that OPEC and Russia agreed over last week, they hold to that or not. But a lot of it, and probably most of it fundamentally, hinges on whether U.S. tight oil production grows faster or slower than expected in response to whatever price environment we're in. So in other words, the short-term price outlook, we think it's rebalancing, but it's going to remain volatile and uncertain. No one's going to be able to predict it very well. As for the longer term, we do something called the BP Energy Outlook. In 2017, our outlook projects that what we consider a base case scenario. And so let me go through a couple of things in the base case scenario that we've projected. And we update this every year. We think global energy demand will rise by about 30% between 2015 and 2035, with China and India alone being 50% of that. To put that in perspective, that's like another U.S. and China of energy use by 2035. Fossil fuels will see their share, their proportion of primary consumption decline, yet they'll still account for more than 3/4 of total energy in 2035. Coal consumption is projected to peak sometime in the mid-2020s, thanks in large part to a decline in coal demand, both from advanced economies in the OECD as well as China. And natural gas will be the fastest growing fossil fuel, led by U.S. shale gas and the expansion of LNG, liquefied natural gas, that will help produce a globally integrated gas market. And so meanwhile, renewables their share of total energy consumption will grow from about 3% worldwide in 2015 to about 10% in 2035, making renewables far and away the fastest growing energy source. In addition, the energy efficiency of the global economy will increase. It will improve. It'll improve rapidly, with worldwide energy intensity falling by 33% by 2035 from 2015. Now, as for CO2 emissions, energy-related CO2 emissions we think could grow by 13% by 2035 from today's levels, compared with about 51% growth between 1995 and 2015. So that's the base case. And then, as our chief economist, some of you may know him, Spencer Dale says, and he said this at the launch of our Energy Outlook last time we put it out, is that forecasting is not about getting it right or wrong. It's about better understanding the nature of the uncertainties that you're going to face. So for our outlook, we do consider some key uncertainties, and some of those are the speed of the world's mobility revolution and how it affects or disrupts oil demand, the speed at which natural gas consumption increases, and the speed at which the world transitions to a lower carbon energy economy. So just to clarify, when we talk about mobility revolution, we're talking about the ongoing shift to electric and autonomous vehicles, along with the rise of innovations and behavior like car sharing and ride pooling. Now, each of these three big uncertainties, which is mobility revolution, shift to natural gas, and the lower carbon transition, each of them could play a very significant role in changing the path of energy demand and greenhouse gas emissions. For example, we have what we call a faster transition scenario. That's a scenario in which a world takes more aggressive action to reduce emissions. And in that scenario, renewables account for 16%, and we said 10% in the base case, 16% of total energy in 2035, as opposed to what we said in the base case. We have another scenario called even faster transition. These are very cleverly named. The renewable share of total energy goes to 23% by 2035. Those are gigantic shifts, gigantic. So it's a bunch of numbers, I know, that I've just given out, but this much is pretty clear. In order to accelerate the transition to a materially lower carbon energy mix quickly, the world's got to do significantly more than what it's doing today. But of course, as we all know, it's easy to call for greater action on low carbon energy policy. It's much, much harder to lay out a detailed blueprint that's both economically responsible and technologically feasible. We need to remember that when it comes to energy and carbon, we face two competing challenges. One, the world has to continue delivering the energy that drives human progress and lifts people out of poverty, while at the same time reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Those are the twin challenges. And with these challenges in mind, BP has identified 6 key actions that we believe can help the world and help BP transition to a lower carbon future. Now, we're doing important work in each one of these areas as we have for many years now, and those actions include those 6: putting a price on carbon, expanding natural gas production while taking steps to reduce methane emissions, expanding the use of renewable energies, investing in startups and innovation aimed at accelerating the development and commercial viability of low-carbon technologies, and improving the energy efficiency of industrial operations, and lastly, helping consumers around the world improve their own energy efficiency. Now, we believe these 6 factors, carbon pricing, natural gas and methane, renewable energy, technological innovation, operations efficiency, and consumer efficiency, we believe these factors are the key to a lower carbon future. Now, BP is committed to playing our part in helping the world achieve a more sustainable energy mix. Now, this commitment, of course, is reflected in our long-term strategy. As we described a few months ago to the investing world, the strategy has 4 pillars. First, BP is shifting our upstream portfolio towards natural gas and what we call advantaged oil, by which we mean higher margin or lower cost oil. Second, we are seeking market-led growth, high growth markets growth in our downstream businesses. Third, we are supporting innovative companies and low carbon technologies through venturing and other investments. And fourth, we are modernizing and digitizing everything we can in our operations across the company to drive greater efficiency and productivity. Now, needless to say, each and every one of these pillars is underpinned by BP's commitment to safety, which will always be our most important value. And it will be the foundation of everything we do going forward. On the upstream side, BP has brought on 24 major projects in the past 5 years, including 6 in 2016 alone. And one of those 6 projects that came on last year was our Thunder Horse South expansion in the Gulf of Mexico here not far from Houston. It started up 11 months early and $150 million under budget, thankfully. We expect to bring another 7 projects on this year, and they're in Australia, Egypt, Oman, Trinidad, and the North Sea. 6 of the 7 are natural gas. Looking further ahead, we have 9 additional projects scheduled to start up between 2018 and 2021. And that's including our $9 billion Mad Dog Phase 2 project, also here in the Gulf of Mexico. So in terms of BP's daily production around the world, we expect to add about 800,000 barrels of oil equivalent, net oil equivalent by 2020, and about 1 million barrels a day by 2021. Now, today, natural gas accounts for about 50% of our portfolio. By the mid-2020s, we expect that to go up to about 60%. And so beyond producing natural gas, we market it. We market a lot of it. In fact, we're the largest marketer of natural gas here in North America, as you saw partly on the film. And we sell enough to meet the average daily needs of every home and commercial building in the United States. We're also supporting the lower carbon transition through our U.S. wind energy business and our Brazilian biofuels business. Indeed, we have the largest operated renewable energy business of any of the major oil and gas companies. We also have several large wind farms here in Texas. And on the innovation and technology side, beyond these base businesses, we have a company called BP Ventures where we've invested about $325 million over the last several years, supporting, for a large part, low carbon technologies. And last year alone, we announced 5 new venture investments. One of those was a $30 million investment into Fulcrum Bioenergy, which is a California-based company that has, we think, pioneered the development and production of a unique low-carbon jet fuel. So all of these investments are in addition to what BP's support for something called the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. And OGCI is an effort that was started by 10 companies, including both international oil companies like ourselves and Shell, and national oil companies like Saudi Aramco and CNPC. Those companies together, the 10 companies represent about 20% of global oil and gas production. Now, part of OGCI's work is the creation of an entity within that called the Climate Investments. It's backed by a collective pledge from OGCI companies to invest about $1 billion over 10 years in low-carbon technology. And right now, the biggest focus for that in those investment ideas are around reducing methane emissions and developing carbon capture, use, and storage technology, and improving energy efficiency at the transportation and industrial sector levels. Now, I mentioned we're doing a lot in modernization, BP, as a company, and our internal modernization push is aiming to create a more agile business and to maximize the vast potential of digital technology, and to foster a mindset, even in the upstream, which some of you may recognize, that's focused on margins in a similar way that our downstream businesses have had to be focused in the past. And to give you just one small example of our work on the digital side, through BP's partnership with General Electric, we've been pilot testing something we call the Plant Operations Advisor technology, and that's been piloted here in the Gulf of Mexico. And that technology, Plant Operations Advisor, gives our teams advanced real-time surveillance at big data scale to detect potential facility issues well in advance of those occurring. And we're currently using this to process, just in the Gulf of Mexico, about 150,000 sensor sites per minute. And we're going to roll this out across 30 fields by the end of next year. So that's one small example of a good example of how big data and technology is merging and can make our operations better, but not only more efficient, but also safer. Now, whether it's in the Gulf of Mexico, it's in Alaska, lower 48, at our refineries, or wherever in the world it is, as I said, safety is the foundation of everything we do. So in the 7 years since the Deepwater Horizon accident, we have worked very hard. We've worked relentlessly to improve our standards, our training, our oversight, our technology, and strengthening, I believe, our underlying safety culture. And regardless of how our business strategy or operational footprint may change, safety will always be our core value, and it will be our most important commitment. That's why our Houston Monitoring Center here, that we're very proud of, provides around-the-clock support to our operations around the Gulf and elsewhere around the world. It's why we use state-of-the-art simulations and simulation machines to prepare our people for the challenges that they may face in the field. And everyone in BP, we hope, we expect, and we believe that everyone has the responsibility to make sure everything is safe around them, will stop things when they need to. And in the long run, we know, maybe better than anyone, you can't be a strong or sustainable company if you're not a safe company. So as we continue building a safer, stronger, more sustainable business, we'll continue to also advocate flexible, well-designed, market-based energy and carbon policies. Now, BP has long believed that energy production and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive, and the U.S. shale gas revolution has provided absolute confirmation of this in my mind. Indeed, the shale boom has demonstrated that it is possible to increase energy production while reducing economy-wide CO2 emissions. But here's the key point. Both the shale boom and the simultaneous drop in U.S. emissions have been driven mainly by market forces, not by top-down regulations. Moving forward, BP believes the U.S. should continue letting the market drive things rather than to try to pick winners and losers. As I said a moment ago, we support the use of flexible, well-designed, market-based mechanisms, such as an economy-wide carbon price, to create the right incentives both for energy producers as well as energy consumers. Now, for just one final thought before I wrap up, given current political volatilities, not only here in the U.S., but also in the U.K., Europe, and elsewhere around the world, none of us can predict what the world's energy and carbon policies will look like 2 years from now, much less 10 or 20 years from now. But we still believe that oil and gas companies will remain essential to human prosperity, 2 years from now, 10 years, 20 years, and beyond. And earlier in my remarks, I mentioned that in BP's latest Energy Outlook report, we outlined multiple long-term energy scenarios based on different projections of how fast the lower carbon transition will occur. It's important to note that in all the scenarios, and this has been worked as well with other independent researchers like International Energy Agency, MIT, IHS Markit, et cetera. In each of these studies, they project oil and gas to continue to be crucially important to the world energy economy in 2035 and beyond. Now, the industry has to work safely, we have to work responsibly, and we have to do our part to help create a secure and sustainable global energy mix. And here in Houston, we have companies, universities, public officials all working together to help us meet those challenges. And we also have the Greater Houston Partnership, which has provided valuable support to business leaders, researchers, and policymakers alike. And indeed, I think Greater Houston Partnership epitomizes Houston's dynamic economy, innovative culture, and the can-do spirit. So for all these reasons, it's been a very great honor for me to speak here with you today. I want to thank you again for allowing me the opportunity, and thank you for your attention and patience. Thank you very much. Bob?
Well, thank you, Lamar, and I really appreciate your insights, not just on the oil and gas outlook, as we typically define it, but your reference to the innovation that's occurring, to the startup efforts underway that you support, the digitization and the movement towards data science, big data. These are all themes that we're talking a lot about in Houston, and we want to partner with you, BP, in those efforts. So thank you very much. For all of you, thank you all for being here. I do want to mention an event that's occurring at the end of the summer, which is our soiree. Most of you have heard about it. It's a great time, a great party, and it occurs on August 26th. And it's our way of saying at the end of the summer, welcome back, let's get back to work. So thank you all for being here. Let's have a round of applause for Lamar McKay. Thank you very much. And if I don't see you again, have a great summer. We'll see you in August. Thank you very much.